Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Stats and Scars episode hosted by Jared May, and I'm joined by the Analyst here, and we're going to be getting into, of course, stats and scars. So we're going to start off with our injuries first, lean into our stats after that, and then following that, we're going to be going straight into college football playoff analysis as well as the Army versus Navy predictions. Kind of a nice little 30-minute episode for you guys before the weekend break. And then next weekend, we're going to be diving pretty deep into the college football playoff predictions, expected outcomes, and whatnot. But if you're a first-time listener, you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, at Shadow the Script, as well as TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter, all at Shadow the Script under one hood. So, without further ado, let's go right into the injuries. I'll be taking over, of course, for the medical guy. We're going to start with David Njoku in Cleveland. So he's dealing with a hamstring injury. He has not practiced all week long, and it's looking unlikely for him to play this weekend. That is big news concerning for a lot of playoff teams out there. A lot of these injuries I'm going to go through are oriented around fantasy football playoffs that are starting for 99% of everybody this upcoming week. But yeah, David Njoku, so might have to find a tight end replacement for Njoku this upcoming weekend. Next up is the Dolphins' Jalen Waddle, another hamstring injury. I think this is just kind of resting throughout the week and kind of just letting that thing simmer for a little bit, and should be good to go on Sunday, but it's going to be up to a game time decision leading up to the weekend, so just keep monitoring that as well. Breece Hall, knee injury, misses practice Thursday. He missed last week's game. He's looking and on track to probably miss the game this weekend as well. Just continue to monitor it. Braylon Allen is the backup running back, as well as I believe Isaac Davis, I believe, is the third
Isaiah
back
Davis
as well. Isaiah Davis. Alvin Kamara is dealing with an illness. He didn't practice Thursday. This is a team that's also probably starting to shut down some of their best players, but the illness injury should not withhold him from playing on Sunday, but just, per usual, continue to monitor that. And we'll see. I mean, it's second straight practice with an illness. There's just something going around here in the South, so we will see how that progresses with Kamara and the Saints. Malik Neighbors logs limited practice with a hip injury on Thursday. He should be good to go this weekend, according to the notes. Fantasy managers are suggested to start him without hesitation if he's active this Sunday versus Baltimore. It's also not a good matchup with Drew Lock against the Baltimore Ravens. Tony Pollard dealing with an ankle injury, not seen practicing Thursday. Reporters didn't see him on the practice field. He wasn't able to practice on Wednesday either. This is a team that is 3-10, so his Week 15 availability is up in the air. Tyjae Spears will be primed for a lot more activity if Pollard cannot go. George Pickens still not practicing. He's listed as doubtful for this weekend according to the Sleeper app. Of course, he's been dealing with that hamstring injury. He was out last week, hasn't practiced all week this week, but the chances are very slim for him playing on Sunday, so look for other options. Calvin Austin would be another receiver for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Bucky Irving with a back and hip injury. Of course, he injured his hip 2 weeks ago on that nice little 27-point fantasy outcome. This past weekend, he exited the game in the first quarter after 4 carries with back tightness, so he hasn't practiced all week. Rachaad White obviously would be the main running back to replace Bucky Irving in this matchup. A lot of fantasy managers are depending on Bucky here, so including myself. So if you have other options, I would rely on those. I just wouldn't want to get hit with just an out of nowhere, he only gets 20% snap count. So just be really careful with Bucky Irving. Another player on the Buccaneers that's dealing with a hamstring injury, not seen practicing Thursday, is Mike Evans. So not seen during the open portion, absent from Wednesday's practice as well with also the same hamstring injury. Expectation seems to be that he'll suit up for Week 15, but just continue to keep your eyes on it. Kenneth Walker, K9, dealing with a calf injury. I believe he missed last week's game, and Zach Charbonnet was able to take over for him. He's considered day-to-day, and his availability for Week 15 is up in the air. So yeah, like I mentioned, Zach Charbonnet will probably get at least a 50% snap share, even if Kenneth Walker is good to go. So might want to, throw that guy in the flex if you have to, or bench if possible. Darnell Mooney with the Atlanta Falcons dealing with a foot injury. I believe he missed a game about 2 weeks ago and was able to return last week and had a pretty solid game. This looks to be like they're phrasing it as a new health concern, as he's been dealing with like an Achilles injury since about week 11. But just keep an eye on his status through Friday and Saturday's practice. I believe they play on Monday night, so he kind of has an extra day of rest. I expect him personally to play, but there are other options at the Falcons as well for pass catchers. Might be a good week for Kyle Pitts, but famous last words of a fool. But yeah, that wraps up our injury list going into this weekend. And I'll honestly start with like a quick little DB list. We're going to go with a down bad list. And, it's been said, and I'm pretty sure the analysts would agree with me on this one, is Ryan Day and Ohio State. Just the state of Ohio issued a sportsmanlike rule essentially through their own government system in that state that they can't
that's literally
flags.
The first one I had. Is the representative?
I figured we'd just joint on that one, like join together for the same DB list one, because other than that, like Ohio State fans, Buckeyes across the nation were pretty outraged and triggered, both finding out that happened and the fact that they have to defend it.
Right.
So yeah, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that part of the DB list there.
I just think talk about rivalries over, I think it's even more about being a sore loser. Like, that's just completely being a sore loser when you can't, take an L and be like, oh, they're putting a flag on my field. It's like if you were playing away and the options were flipped, you're going to tell me you wouldn't be doing the same thing?
Yeah.
Like, it's just loser mentality, in my opinion. So
yeah,
I also had them on a DB list as well. I saw that and I was like, you've got to be kidding me. That's such a joke.
Yeah. And what's really funny about it, in my opinion, is just like how much favored the Ohio State Buckeyes were when they played, and just how poorly they handled it. Because they're already calling for Ryan Day's head because of his. I guess we'll see how he does in the college football playoff, but it's not a gimme with Tennessee. It's just really funny because if you look at a guy like Ryan Day, I look at his face and he just seems like a guy that would pander and just be really uncomfortable in like a rivalry atmosphere. So like once the game concluded, he's on the field just kind of standing, looking around like, what is everybody doing? He's got the voice, he's got the face, and it just reminds me of like a terrified Will Ferrell is what it reminds me of. But anyway, if you have any more on the DB list, you're welcome to share. But that's really the only one I had.
No, honestly, the only other one I had was UNC. I just do not like that. They hired Bill Belichick.
Yep.
I don't know how well. I say DB, but it was really more of like topic of discussion.
Potential.
I'm just really not sure how well that Bill Belichick style of offense is going to work with a bunch of college kids. Or I say style of offense, but style of coaching is going to work with a bunch of college kids. You make a 400-page manifesto, talk about how you want to make it a whole ordeal about a pipeline to make it to the NFL, but I just don't know how like the NIL and the way that Bill Belichick is really going to work. But on the other hand, he's also really pissed off about how the NFL works now, which there's reports that are coming out about that, about how he dislikes the way that a lot of organizations are ran now, and there's not really a factor that holds guys accountable like he did the Patriot way that everybody used to talk about 10 years ago. So, I don't know. I'll be interested to see how all of that plays out, but it's very evident that he's pissed off with the NFL and that he's going to go try and make that work at UNC, and I'm just not sure how much that's going to work. So,
yeah, I thought it was very interesting how his former players like Brady Edelman and Gronk all basically said there's no way that he would go do that. And then about 48 hours later, he goes and does it.
Yeah.
And, there's an argument that he only chose North Carolina because there wasn't better college football openings available at the time. And it's like, well, I think Bill Belichick is smart enough to wait for an opening if there's going to be one. I don't think he went to UNC because it was his only option. I think a lot of college programs would kill to have a guy like Belichick, off stature alone. But whether or not it'll work, I'm not pointing out whether or not it'll work or not. I'm just saying like that narrative is just kind of it just seems kind of trappy in my opinion, as if like you're demeaning Belichick's capabilities from like the media is for saying like, oh yeah, well UNC is basically all you could get, and you're like, what? Like,
yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of teams still in the playoffs right now. Not a lot of coach firings currently. Like, let's calm down. UNC is not no run of the litter. They're a pretty solid college program in pretty much every sport. So,
yeah,
I'm interested to see. I say potential DB list.
Yeah, I think that's really what I wanted to do, is just kind of talk about how I feel like that's just kind of a hire you look at and you go, why?
Yeah, I want to personally. I actually want to talk about it in depth probably next week. Because it's a huge topic. Like I want to get into it because
that's a huge deal. I mean, that's a 6-time Super Bowl winning coach. Or is it 5? It's 5.
Yeah, 5.
It is 5 because Brady won his 6th with the Bucs. A 5-time Super Bowl winning head coach going to an ACC program. That's just, to me, that's like, okay.
Watch out, SMU.
Yeah.
All right, let's roll right into stat analysis if you're ready.
I am, yeah. So this week, since everybody's playoffs usually start about this time, or most leagues do, usually, I call out the quarterback one, wideout one, or I bring in an interesting stat. I think this week, going off of Jared's injuries, I think it plays right in. We're kind of going fantasy corner this week. Instead of stats and scars, we're going start him, sit him, and fantasy corner. So on this side, I'm going to be giving you some startums and sit-ems. And, I'm going to try and stay away from, like, your top 5 to 6 guys. Your Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, your guys that you're always going to start, like Lamar, Burrow, Josh Allen, or for your running backs, like Saquon, Bijan, Jahmyr Gibbs, those guys I'm going to try and stay away from. But we're going to go ahead and start with quarterbacks, and I've got some interesting ones for the quarterbacks. I actually like Aaron Rodgers to start this year. If you're in a pinch and you need somebody to start this week, you got an injured quarterback, or you don't really like your quarterback's matchup, I actually like Aaron Rodgers this week. Last week he threw for 350 yards for the first time. He's finally starting to get something rolling with the Jets in terms of Devontae Adams and Garrett Wilson. It wouldn't be the top of my list, but the matchup, what he did last week, and what he has the potential to do with Breece Hall out, I think there's a case that he could throw 2 or 3 touchdowns and get you about 18 points, 20 points, which is, happy to write home about at the quarterback position if you don't have one of the top 5 to 6 guys.
If you're in a bind.
Yeah. But these are the guys I like a little bit more. Start Sam Darnold. He's playing the Bears this week. I like him to throw like another 2 to 4 touchdowns and have a hell of a day. I just think that him with Jordan Addison and the way that the dynamic is over there, like one moment you're having to worry about Justin Jefferson, and then all of a sudden Jordan Addison scores 3 touchdowns. And so I think that's going to continue. And he's one of those guys that is either going to be sitting on somebody else's bench or he will be on the waiver wire. But it's one of those guys where you're going to have him out there, potentially, depending on the size or benching of your rosters. The other one I actually like is K1. I think Kyler Murray can bounce back. He's got a good matchup against the Pats this week. New England's defense is not very good. And last week was his first time having a multi-interception game. So I actually think that he's going to come back and he'll be his regular self, score 20 to 25 points. So if you have K1, don't freak out about benching him after that terrible outing he had. But I would start him without hesitation this week. I think he's got a good play. So my sit-in for the quarterbacks, I've got C.J. Stroud. I don't like this matchup against Miami.
Yeah.
I would look for another quarterback here. This is one of those things where it's going to be either a shitty game or a slow game for him, and he's going to slowly kill your team starting him in that quarterback spot. So I think that Stroud would be a good replacement. Would be like Aaron Rodgers. Play the juicy matchup. Find something that gives you a little bit of juice, or something that gives you some hope to put your team in a favorable position. So the other one I actually don't like either is Baker Mayfield. I would sit Baker Mayfield this week. Against the Chargers. Not really sure what's going on at the running back position. Not really sure how it's going to play out, and how Baker Mayfield is on the offensive side of the ball when he doesn't have a running game, and how the Bucs really don't have a running game. The Chargers don't have a bad defense. So if you have a backup or another option, I would consider it. But if you have to start him, I would. But if you have like an Aaron Rodgers or something like that, maybe a good idea to look for him. I know Aaron Rodgers is out there. You probably think it's crazy for me to mention Aaron Rodgers after the year he's had, but
you're not looking for a dud. You're looking for a consistent, give me 18. Give me 18 points, and I'll be a solid.
Yeah. So so now we're going to move on to running backs. I'll keep these short and sweet because I like them. Chuba Hubbard, I think this matchup against Dallas is perfect. I think you need to start Chuba Hubbard. Only running back left on the field now for him, and he has been very consistent when he's kind of in that position. So I actually like Chuba Hubbard Chase Brown went crazy on Dallas's defense. And honestly, Dallas losing to Marion Overshown for the year, which sucks for Cowboys fans, but nothing new when it comes to linebacker injuries. Chuba Hubbard's going to be in a great position to look good, and the Panthers are actually looking frisky. Nobody wants to play him.
They're a favorite to go in this weekend over Dallas.
And I like him a ton in this game. I also like Brian Robinson. With Eckler out, Saints on life alert, and B-Rob kind of being, when he's healthy, he's a touchdown merchant. When they get to the goal line, they're giving Brian Robinson the ball. I like both of these guys to have 20-plus point days on Sunday. So, guys I don't like for running backs, sit Jonathan Taylor. This is a matchup nightmare. If you have another option, this is a matchup nightmare for him against the Broncos. The Broncos have a really good running defense. This is a situation if you have like a Tyrone Tracy or a Brian Robinson or like a handcuff like Zach Charbonnet, this is a perfect week to utilize one of them because Taylor is probably not going to have that big of a game. And the Broncos are just a damn good defense. We've talked a lot about him on this podcast. The other one I don't like, James Cook. I know this is crazy, and he had a bad week last week, but he's another guy I would be a little bit hesitant about playing Detroit. I could see this being another Josh Allen hero game, kind of like last week. Jared covered the Rams game last week, but he was completely uninvolved in that game. I think, Jared, you have him on your fantasy team.
He had 6 carries for 20 yards.
Yeah.
And none of the running backs did anything. It made me feel better because usually, and I mentioned this, one of the running backs on the Bills will just do something crazy one time a game, and it pisses you off. You're like, Ray Davis, 50-yard reception touchdown? Where's Cook? And then the next week it's Ty Johnson, 30-yard catch. Like, so it's a little mind-boggling because he only gets about a 55% snap share. James Cook does, so it's weird.
Yeah. I just feel like that in games like that for the Bills, they tend to just absolutely put their entire team on Josh Allen's back. So for the start category, I kind of like the Jets receivers. It goes along with what I was saying about Aaron Rodgers. I like Devontae Adams and Garrett Wilson to both kind of have decent outings. They would be a good flex play if you've already got guys that are higher tier, but I actually like both of them because the fact of the matter is that the Jags suck. And if you're not going to have Breece Hall out there, you might as well just let Aaron Rodgers throw a lot of dink and ducks.
He's got nothing to lose either.
Yeah, and Devontae Adams and Garrett Wilson are going to get a lot of those receptions. So the other one I actually really like is Jacoby Myers. I think he's going to get a lot of targets. They're playing. Oh gosh,
Who's even the quarterback for the Raiders?
It could be I think it's likely going to be Aiden O'Connell, but if it's not, it's Desmond Ritter. But
I think it's Desmond Ritter because McConnell's out for the year. Yeah, it's Ritter.
If you go look at his stats, he gets a ton of targets. They're playing the Falcons, who is a terrible pass defense, and he gets a ton of targets. When Ritter was out there last time, he got 12 targets, and I think Bowers got like 12 as well. So the one I don't like for receivers is sit Darnell Mooney. Falcons are majorly struggling. I think if Kirk Cousins is going to go anywhere with the ball, it's probably going to be Drake London. And although they were playing the Raiders, I just don't see how he gets the ball with this injury he's got going on too. He's going to be playing through an injury, and the last time that happened, it was flip-flopped actually against Dallas where Drake London was hurt. Mooney just ate up the Dallas Cowboys defense. So,
yeah.
And then last but not least, tight ends. I like Mark Andrews. I think against the Giants, you could see him have a big day. Start him. Giants are struggling. And then before the bye, you could see Andrews and Lamar finally making a connection, which is nice. So I also like Evan Ingram with no quarterbacks. I like him getting the ball against the Jets, who haven't been able to stop a tight end that well this season.
Yeah.
So I also like Evan Ingram. Sit Jake Ferguson and Dalton Schultz. I think Jake Ferguson with Cooper Rush, for some God unknown reason, Cooper Rush cannot throw to anybody, and Jake Ferguson is not involved. And then Dalton Schultz, it just falls right in line with C.J. Stroud. I just think there's a lot of better options, either on the waiver wire or on your bench for tight end. Playing Miami, who's got a pretty good pass defense, and is starting to heat up. I just don't see that being a good outcome for the Texans. I could actually see the Texans losing that game. So,
Me too. I was going to say that.
Yeah, that's the two friskiest teams on the AFC and the NFC side. AFC Dolphins, NFC, maybe the Panthers. I mean, are the Panthers the most frisky football team on the NFC?
Yeah, I would. This is their first game that they've been favored all year, which is hilarious against the Cowboys. Yeah. And they should have beat the Eagles last week, and they almost beat the Chiefs. So it's one of those things where, like, just keep going, Bryce Young. Just keep playing well, and whatever happens, happens. Because I would actually be happy if they beat the Cowboys. I wouldn't be upset, like, oh my God,
we're team tank for sure.
Like, I want to get a better draft pick, like especially after Overshown not being here till 2026. Yeah, give me a double L this weekend.
Well, that's all I've got in terms of starter sit 'em. Try to do something a little bit different, and remind y'all as y'all hear me talk about like Evan Ingram and stuff. I'm trying to give you guys that are outside of the top 5 to 6 people and could be on the waiver wire or could be stashed away on your bench, and you're trying to decide between, like...
Yeah, start Brock Bowers. Well, no shit.
Yeah, well, no shit. Like,
yeah, exactly.
He's trying to stay away from, like, the, start Jamar Chase.
It's just, yeah. If you're in a bind, you're going to want to start Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson this week. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I agree with most of those, honestly. I think that Monday Night Football game is going to be a hot pack of ass. But, like, I will not be tuning into that game. So, but for fantasy reasons, Drake London, Brock Bowers, maybe little Jacoby Myers, 9 targets, 7 catches for 22 yards from Ritter. It's a close 10 points, so better than 0.
Yeah, I just think that if some of these are spicy, but I'm thinking matchups. Like if you're a good fantasy football player, that's what matters the most going into playoffs. If you had somebody that's been completely consistent all year, but they're playing the Broncos, example, Jonathan Taylor, probably not a good idea to start him. But if you have somebody that's on the bench, like Brian Robinson, that's playing the Saints, good idea to maybe throw him in there because he's going to score 20. They're going to lean on Brian Robinson in the run game, probably. So, good chance that he scores 20.
I'm going to take you up on the Evan Ingram one more. Well, I definitely have to because I have Njoku starting, and we're playing each other in fantasy in that league. But I'm going to have to go with Evan Ingram and hope he gets that 10 reception, 100-yard game. That would be fantastic.
If you're playing
for
me, that's my luck.
Yeah,
there's a good chance that's gonna happen.
Yeah, you're just looking to stay healthy for this week, which is impossible. So, all right, yeah. Well, let's get into some college football analysis. We're gonna do the predictions for this week. We've got Army versus Navy. Army is ranked 19th at 11-1. I can't remember if they won their conference or not. I think they did.
I thought Army was 22.
It shows. Well, I think that the official poll and the AP poll are different. I might be wrong on that, but
I'm looking at 22.
I've noticed that whenever I do like the 12th men, it's like it shows a certain rank on one website, and then on ESPN it shows a different. It's weird.
I'm using ESPN.
Top 25 Army, 11-1.
Yeah, there you go. Top 20 to 25 Army.
Yeah, versus 8-3 Navy. And both these teams started undefeated until they ran into Notre Dame, and it just kind of took it took Navy's season and shredded it into pieces, but it took Army luckily bounced back, and I believe they won their conference. I want to say that they did.
Army?
I think they did. But yeah.
Well, I mean, they're 11-1.
They have to.
I'm going to say yes.
Yeah, they had to have. Anyway, so they played this Saturday at 2 p.m. at Northwest Stadium in Landover, Maryland. And so it'll be a really fun college game day preview. It's always super cool to see how the traditions of both of these teams kind of collide at the end of the year rivalry. So I'm looking forward to it. It says to be 36 degrees with scattered clouds. So a lot of running the football in this game. This is going to be ground and pound, power high. But what are your official predictions for this matchup?
I'm going to go Army in this one. I think that Army has a better consistent triple option, as you could say. But I just think that since them being 11-1, they've been a little bit more consistent this year. And if you go look at their schedule, they've beaten the shit out of some teams running what they run. I mean, the only team they've lost to is Notre Dame, which rightfully so, that makes sense. For the conference championship, they beat Tulane 35-14. They beat Rice 37-14. They beat Temple 42-14. They beat Tulsa 49-7. And that's running like a mixture of veer spread option. I mean, shit, their quarterback has 1,500 rushing yards and 877 passing yards. So that should tell you a lot about how they run their football team. So I've got Army in this one. The spread is -6.5. I don't expect the game to be high scoring, but because I actually think Navy has a good defense. Yeah. But I do think that Army wins by a touchdown, so I'm going to say like 28-14, 24-21. I'm going to go 24-17.
I like it.
That's what I'm going to go.
I'm actually going to go with Navy in my prediction. And the reason why, I think they have a better quarterback who can sling it, and I think that might be the difference in this game. But I think the most exciting aspect of this matchup is that both of these teams have been good all year. So I actually think it's going to be more high scoring than people anticipate. I'm going with Navy winning the game 31-28 in a kind of a back and forth, like you score, we score, you score type of matchup. Army will look solid. I think they'll run the ball really well. Both teams will. I think Navy will pull out an upset. They've been kind of dying for a revival since the Notre Dame game, and I think it might be against Army this weekend.
Yeah, I don't think that's a terrible.
You can go either way. I mean,
yeah, I just think that Army's had the better season. Yeah, I think they have kind of a better roster, and like I've said, they've beaten the shit out of some teams. But I mean, if you go look at Navy has two.
Yeah, they started off hot. That's kind of what
what's even funnier is, do you know who Navy's playing in their bowl game?
Oh shit, Oklahoma. That's actually going to be an interesting game.
And Army's playing Marshall, who actually we probably should have added to the DB list. Marshall's coach left, and there's a rumor out there that like 70-75% of their players are going to be on the transfer portal. So,
wow.
Yeah.
I know they won their conference, so it's funny. You win the conference, you're like, peace. Like, that's a great season, guys. I'm out.
Forget where their coach is going, but like the coach announced that he's leaving, and like all of their players were like, should we go in the portal?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Okay, let's do the the college football playoff outlook for this weekend. So here's the angle that we're going to kind of drive into here, and that's we're going to get into predictions next week. I did a very way too early predictions in my past episode, but we're going to look at who has the strongest pathway to the college or the national championship and who has the toughest. And then kind of predict our outcomes. He's going to do his, I'm going to do mine. So I'll bring up the picture here, and then we'll kind of get started with our predictions. But, so I got it up on the screen. This is your bracket. You've got, in the first round, you've got on the top left corner, Tennessee and Ohio State facing off against one another in SEC versus Big Ten matchup. On the top right side of the bracket, we've got Indiana, Notre Dame facing one another, so that'll be in Notre Dame. You've got SMU going to Penn State to play, and Clemson coming down south to Austin to play Texas. So this will be an interesting first round of the playoffs. Like I mentioned in the previous episode, I think they did a pretty good job of determining the 12 teams, and I put my reasonings on that episode. But from this, who do you think has the toughest road to the national championship? And then I'll follow up with who I think, and we can just kind of go back and forth. And it's interesting.
I would have to say Ohio State.
Yeah, they have the toughest
Probably,
road?
I think that they have the toughest
I'm
road.
leaning that direction as well.
The reason I say that is because I actually don't like Oregon's draw here. Having to play either Tennessee or Ohio State after going undefeated is tough. And I think that the way that they do these buys is a little bit backwards. I think that's something they're going to have to fix moving forward is how they... I just don't think that the conference championship buys... I know they're trying to put an emphasis on the conference championship buys, but like in my opinion... I don't necessarily know that Arizona State should have gotten a bye here.
Yeah,
because
that's what I argued.
But going back to who I think has the toughest road, I think it's Ohio State. I think Tennessee is a better team than Ohio State. I think Ohio State's going to have to play damn near perfect in that game to win that game. And if you win that game, then you have to go play Oregon. So I think Ohio State's probably got one of the toughest roads in that pack. And I'll let you say what you say before I say who I think has the easiest road.
Yeah. Well, I've definitely voiced my opinion for who I dislike to get a first-round bye, and obviously it was Boise State and Arizona State because it just kind of looks like it kind of puts the bottom of that bracket on the screen to like basically show, oh yeah, if you win your first game, you're probably almost a lock to go to the national championship or the semifinal. And I agree. I think it's Tennessee and Ohio State up at the top have the toughest road, but ultimately that leaks down to Oregon. I think Oregon they got a really bad draw. I think they got screwed. I think the committee has to fix something like this. You're the only undefeated team in the country, and you pulled the toughest hand out of every single college football playoff team in this bracket, which I think is completely disrespectful. But to Dan Lanning's point, he talked about his players, and he's like, my players came up and told me the other day, put the ball in the parking lot and we'll play whoever's in front of us. And you're like, okay, well, I like that attitude, but at the end of the day, the reality is that they got a really tough pool. I mean, it's kind of bonkers to me that they drew a very consistent Tennessee or a team that you played within 2 points of earlier in the season, and they're 10 wins as well.
I do think, though, that this is kind of like a rough draft of the first time going through the college football playoff. I mean, I think that it's a good thing that they're moving to 12, but they're going to have to figure out how to reconstruct this to where either conference championships matter or you're going to have to figure out how to work out the buys. And you got to have one or the other. One thing that I saw that I actually really liked was you expand it even more. But you take the Power 4 conferences and you take the top 4 teams from those Power 4 conferences, and then all 4 of those teams make it. So that would be like Bama, Tennessee, Georgia, and Texas made it this year. And then in the ACC, your top 4 teams and your Big Ten top 4 teams make it. And then you spread them out outside of the bracket and let them all play in. So then that gives you the true like Power 4 conferences, and then you let all your group of 5s go play for another championship. I think that makes sense to me.
Big school, small school type of thing.
Yeah, and I think that's how it should be. Then you still have NIL and all that, but it's like, take my school for example. Sam Houston's never going to compete with freaking UT. They play them next year, and UT's going to spank that ass.
Yeah.
So it avoids stuff like that. Anyway, who do you think has the easiest path to the playoff?
I think it's this is wild, but I think it's Penn State.
I would agree with that.
It's so close with Texas. I just think Clemson's better than what people give him credit for. Like, I think that's actually a pretty tough matchup. And this is not to disrespect SMU, but SMU has to go into Penn State in a whiteout, which is one of the toughest environments to play in college football, and beat them. So a team from Dallas goes all the way up north and plays Penn State, and then if Penn State, beats them, which they played Oregon pretty dang well, which just shocked me, they go and play Boise, and you're like, okay, like Boise and Penn State, just the bigger brand is probably there's just so much more depth than what Boise State can offer, and I think a team like that can shut down Genty to, around 100 yards. However, it is going to probably stop whenever either Notre Dame or Georgia get in. I'm assuming those two teams will be playing one another. That's where it kind of hinges on, that's kind of where the path to the national championship stops. But I get angry because it's going to make this narrative. It's like, oh, yeah, you thought we were scrubs all year. And it's like, well, you are. Because when you finally played somebody that was a legitimate national championship contender, and I do want SMU in there, I'm just saying, I don't know.
After watching the Clemson SMU game, I think SMU's got it. Like, they've got a good electric offense, but
no doubt.
They're going to have to cut down on the mistakes, and I just think Penn State's defense is going to maybe give them troubles. Now, I do think there is an argument to be made that Notre Dame could also have an easy path to the playoff because – Indiana really the argument that everybody that's been saying about Indiana is, they haven't really played anybody. They had to play Ohio State, and Ohio State's, spanked them. But Notre Dame could beat Indiana, and then they could go play Georgia. Georgia's historically a good football team, but Carson Beck's not going to be in that game.
Right.
It's going to be Gunnar Stockton. So Notre Dame also has a good chance to capitalize on their side of the bracket. But yeah, I think the more majority argument could be made towards Penn State solely because SMU is a good football team, but they're not quite where they should be if you're going to put them up against Penn State. So, should be interesting. I think the committee made the right decision by leaving Bama out. I know Jared already went into that, but I like the theory of this bracket. It's just very hard to put it together with a lot of how this played out, and there could be a simplified way further down the line, is what I would say.
Yeah, and everyone's losing their minds per usual. It's like, how can you not get this right the first time? It's like, well, they're never going to do that. They're never going to get it right the first time.
And somebody's always going to be mad about who gets left out. So,
correct.
Like Bama.
It's the same if it's 2, 4, 8, 12. It doesn't matter. There's always going to be teams bitching, saying, well, blah, blah, blah. And, boo-hoo, to be honest. But the one thing I do want to stress, and I stressed it in my previous episode, but in case you missed it, if Texas beats Clemson, they're going to go into Arizona State at a neutral site and absolutely boat race them. And I think that's the clearest. Whoever wins that game, Clemson can probably play Arizona State decently close. But Texas, if they go in there, I'm telling you, it's going to be like 30-plus point differential. And that's not even because I believe Texas is that good. I think Arizona State is not that good. I don't believe in that in any of those Big 12 teams. If any of them would have made it, I don't believe in any of them. And
it's what I was saying last week is when we were projecting. Sorry, I've been looking at a lot of numbers today. Projecting the Big 12 championship, I was like, either one of these teams win and get in, neither one of them are going to be big, competitors. Now, my mind changed a little bit on Arizona State with their running back, but if you shut down him, it's kind of the same for Boise State. If you shut down Genty, or I forget his name, called him Wolverine Jr., but
oh yeah.
I forgot his name, but
he got a weird last name. Number 4, the running back number 4 for Arizona State, I believe.
Yeah, if you which people are saying he should have been up for the Heisman this year.
Yeah, he looks like the short 5'3" Wolverine from the Deadpool.
I don't know how to say this, but it's Scam Scabetto or Scatibo or
Skippity,
something like that. Please God, no.
Brain rot.
Anyway, they're both of those teams are both like, if you can take down the running back, then you're probably in a pretty decent position.
Yeah. Overall, like, without going matchup by matchup, who do you think most likely gets in the national championship? And then we'll conclude the episode. I still think...
I actually really like Tennessee.
Really?
I do. I think Tennessee is, if you're going to go sleeper, I'm going to say Tennessee.
That might actually be a really good take, because you can totally see a narrative to where it's like, we won the baseball championship and then we won the football championship.
Oh, it had nothing to do with that. I just think...
I'm just saying, like, that's usually a narrative. It's like Tennessee won both in baseball and in football within a year of one another. It's like, okay, yeah, that's like an ESPN post right there. Like,
yeah.
So Tennessee on that side of the bracket, and Notre Dame. That's what you were saying?
On the other side, most likely to get there, who I like to get there, is actually Notre Dame. Most likely to get there, I'm going to say Penn State.
God, I would hate that.
Yeah.
Oh, my God. Yeah, I would say I still love Oregon. Honestly, it sounds really normie of me, but I think Oregon gets there on the left side of the bracket. And then on the right side of the bracket, I can easily see, or not easily, I could see Notre Dame or Georgia. Whoever wins that game, I think, gets in.
Yeah.
If Indiana loses, obviously. If Notre Dame goes and plays Georgia, the winner of that game will go to, in my opinion, will be in the national championship with Oregon. Most likely. But I like the Tennessee take. I could easily see that. I've been a believer in them the whole year.
Yeah. Well, do you have a favorite bowl game before we sign off here? Because I've got 2 or 3 in mind.
Honestly, I know I'm an Aggie. The only one I can think of at the top of my head is that A&M plays USC.
I do like that bowl game.
I think that's a cool
Distribution
bowl game.
Yeah. That's going to be a really fun bowl game to watch. The other one that I had on my list is Texas Tech and Arkansas, the AutoZone Liberty Bowl. I think that's going to be a fun one. And then, of course, my team, I actually like the Sam Houston Georgia Southern one. It's the R+L Carriers New Orleans Bowl, played in New Orleans. I like that one a ton. And the only reason I like that one is because Georgia Southern is actually a very sleepy, good football team as well. Let's see. The other one I liked, I was scrolling through a list here. Go ahead.
I was going to say, the one that's going to be interesting to see is you have kind of 2 Big 12-ish matchups that are going to be really entertaining, is the Alamo Bowl with BYU and Colorado. Like, that's probably going to be a high-scoring affair. And then Iowa State and Miami. Iowa State and Miami is probably going to be an entertaining bowl game. That's the Pop-Tarts Bowl.
The Pop-Tart Bowl.
Which is hilarious. It's like somebody said... So it was a massive hater of Miami. They were like, all that talk from Miami, you got a Heisman quarterback and blah, 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 and you go 10-plus wins, and your greatest achievement in that year is to go play in the Pop-Tart Bowl. And I was like, yeah, that's a little bit of DB list right there.
The other big-name bowl that would be fun to watch, and this is on New Year's Eve, is Bama, Michigan, the ReliaQuest Bowl.
Yeah.
ReliaQuest, or however you say it. It's in Florida, but... Bama, Michigan's a big one. And then, I think depending on who's actually going in the portal and stuff, Duke Ole Miss Tax Slayer Gator Bowl would also be a fun game. That's January 2nd.
Yeah, there's some pretty good bowl games that I'm looking at.
Yeah. I don't know. I was just thinking of some other stuff we could discuss, but those are the bowl games I really like that are outside of the college football playoff.
Yeah, these are not bad. Yeah, I mean that's pretty much all I got on the bowl games. The other ones are all like the 7-5, 6-6 teams where
Yeah, they're like I don't really care to watch this. This might be like you want to have a drink on a Wednesday night and you want to like this bowl right here, California versus UNLV, Wednesday, December 18th.
Yeah,
at 9 p.m. That's when you get home from work and you're like, God.
Yeah.
You crack a beer and you're like, oh look, a bowl game's on.
Yeah, a funny story right quick, and it's like one of my buddies was like, "Are you going to this bar across the street?" I'm like, "Yeah." He said, "There's a college football game on tonight, right?" And I was like, "Yeah, I can't remember who it is." And then he told me, and I was like, "There's no way you would have known that unless you placed a bet." And he's like, "Yeah, I've got like a 6 leg on this game." It's like, yeah, there ain't no way in hell you don't even want like. It was like North Dakota State and somebody else, or like Toledo and Rutgers or something like that. And I was like, okay, yeah. So for the bettors out there, it's a fun time because there might be a game on a Wednesday and you want to throw out a parlay. So good luck to you on that if you're betting on Pittsburgh, Toledo, South Florida, San Jose State, Rutgers, Kansas State, Arkansas State, Bowling Green. Like, have fun.
Not for me.
All right, yep. Well, this concludes our Stats and Scars episode. We'll be back next Thursday. Of course, you got our Shadow the Script episode every Tuesday morning released. And then as we get closer to the college football playoff, we'll be going heavy into that. And we're also going to be approaching the NFL playoffs pretty soon, which will be quite entertaining for all of our degenerates out there listening. So, all right.
Yeah.
We will see everybody next Thursday. And have a great week.
Adios.